We are live at the Cube here in Riyadh, just around the corner from the Kingdom Arena, where on Saturday night, two kings collide in the kingdom, and we will decide who the king of the light heavyweight division is. Two very cold characters, and I'm delighted to be in the company of some very cold characters. Mr. Eddie Hearn,
oh, man,
Mr. Andy Clark, they're cold, and Matt Macklin.
That's cold, look at that.
That is pretty cold, to be fair.
Freezing.
Yeah, but you've worn that one before, Andy, to be fair.
It's a scandalous rumour you're putting around. I haven't actually. This is the new one.
Fiercely denying it. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, mate. Good.
Good to see you. Right, Eddie, let's get into this. Big fight, probably the best fight that can be made in boxing. Beterbiev, Bivol. Talk to me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the best way to describe this fight, Beterbiev is like a ticking time bomb, right? And you've got to slow the clock down before it reaches the moment when you're done. And Bivol is one of the few people that I think can slow that clock down and maybe even outlast the clock. You know, he walks you down, he cuts off the ring so well, and he's so much better than just this big punching, aggressive fighter. He's smart, his footwork's actually underrated, his shot selection's very, very good as well. And he just continuously puts the pressure on. The only person that can beat Artur Beterbiev in boxing, certainly around his weight class, is Dmitry Bivol. Can he do it on Saturday night? He's got to slow that clock down, outbox him, get his respect, and a tough task, but I believe he can do it.
It is a tough task. Andy Clark, let me bring you in here. Stylistically, it's just perfect. Do you agree with Eddie in that the only style and perhaps the only man out there at this weight who can beat Artur Beterbiev is Dmitry Bivol?
I do agree with that because technically he's very, very good. He's got a really good temperament. He knows how to navigate his way through a fight, and the big occasion doesn't scare him because you look at the way Canelo boxes or the way that he has done in the last 3 or 4 years. It's a similar kind of pressure he looks to bring to the pressure that Beterbiev brings. Not many people can exert that level on a fighter, and Bivol was able to handle it. He was unflappable in the face of it. A big moment for me will still be to see what Bivol's reaction is when Beterbiev lands on him in the first round, because he has got this ridiculous power that it's possible Bivol hasn't really felt before. And it could be something a little bit new. I'm not going to say it'll cause him to panic because I just cannot imagine that happening, but it might be something a little bit new for him as an experience. But he's got the tools. He definitely has the tools, and that's what makes it so interesting. These two are just, they are the epitome of prize fighters, of professional boxers. There's no malice towards opponents, there's no malice towards each other, but there's no mercy, none at all, and that's what we'll see on Saturday. I can't wait.
Matt, let's get your early kind of fight week talks. It's grand arrivals today. All of the fighters are going to take to the purple carpet very shortly, but the Beterbiev-Bivol fight week early thoughts from Matt Macklin, please.
A bit like what Eddie said, I think Beterbiev is obviously billed as the beast, the puncher, which he is obviously, but he's way more than that. A bit like Golovkin was, you know, excellent at cutting off the ring, making you feel under pressure, but he's not so close where you can get in and grab him and spoil and nullify. He keeps that perfect distance where you're constantly under threat, and he's just he's never off balance. And even though he's 39, you know, in his last performance, he looked devastating. You know what I mean? You do wonder how long can they keep going, but he hasn't shown much signs of slowing up just yet. So I think that experience, even everything he achieved in the amateurs, you wouldn't achieve what he achieved without being technically and tactically very astute. So I make him a favourite, but Bivol, to me, is someone that boxes to the level of his opposition. Yeah. You know what I mean? When he needs to raise it, he does. So that'll be fascinating to see him at the top of his game.
It feels like for the last few fights with Beterbiev, we've been collectively waiting for him to get old overnight. Anthony Odd hoped. Callum Smith, I'm sure, hoped. I'm sure Callum Johnson a few years ago was probably hoping as well. He doesn't seem to actually get old though, Eddie.
No, I actually really fancied our chances in the Callum Smith fight because for a lot of those reasons, you know, he's been a little bit stop-start. He's had his injuries. Don't forget here, coming off knee surgery as well. Bivol's had the benefit of that interim fight as well. So he's definitely got the momentum. But in that Callum Smith fight, it was scary, you know. It was like I actually expected a guy that might just be coming towards the end. Yard took a little bit out of him, you know, was getting hit a lot in that fight, and then all of a sudden back home performed a lot better. Interesting to see how he fights out here. You know, I mean, those home comforts back in Quebec and Canada, This is a fight on the road.
Yeah.
Bivol's got the experience of 2 fights in the Kingdom before. It's not really something that's been talked about a lot. I'm not saying it's going to throw him off, but he is travelling, he is on the road, he is getting on, he has had knee surgery. We're going to clutch a few more straws out here tonight and pray. But Bivol is the guy to beat him. You know, this is a genuine 50-50 fight. And I think the first few rounds of this fight are going to be really important because, like Andy says, if in the opening 1, 2, 3 rounds he gets caught, he gets marked up, he goes back to the corner, then you're thinking there's a long way to go. What you actually want is to get through 6, 7, 8 rounds and be 5-1 up, 6-2 up after 8, and not hold on, but like think we've got 4 rounds here. And that's what happened. If you look
See
back
the light at the end of the
if you
tunnel.
look back at like the Godzic fight, although he was winning that fight, it was quite close, and he was like he nearly survived, and then just at the death he got taken out. And it's like I thought that Beterbiev doesn't do too much early, even against Callum Smith. Just taking his time. He was still winning rounds, but it wasn't like he just comes out like swinging away. It's pressure, pressure, pressure. But I think Dmitry has the punch volume to win those early rounds. You've got to rack them up, and then you've got to hold on for dear life.
2 cold characters as well, Andy. They've got that same sort of Andy Clark aura, dare I say. They've got that same aura.
Very similar, actually, I think.
But Beterbiev in particular, how do you think he's going to take to this? Because he's not flashy. He doesn't wear all chains and all that kind of thing. Bivol doesn't either, but he doesn't sort of want to be a superstar. This is superstar stuff here. What do we think?
I think he'll enjoy the surroundings, he'll take it in, but ultimately he's not interested in any of this. I don't think either of them are. We were talking to Bivol yesterday, and I just asked him, do you believe in luck? Elite level sport is such a high standard that people sometimes think that they'll think luck is for losers, but they all do believe in it, because a fight like this, you don't see any discernible weakness in your opponent, you suspect they don't see any in you, and whoever does it marginally better on the night, it could well be, will emerge the winner. And you don't really have all that much control over it to an extent. So I think the pair of them, as much as anybody I've probably ever met, they just know exactly what this is, the business that they're in. And they just can't wait for Saturday. I don't think either's really got any problem with the weight. Dimitri's kind of always made it pretty easy, hasn't he?
I think
Dimitri's
a guy that
light heavy for 10 years.
He says he can make 168. I looked at Beterbiev at the pictures yesterday. I know it won't take too much, but he wasn't overly keen to get down to his shorts. I thought he looked a little bit depleted. Don't get me wrong, an absolute monster still. But at 5 days out, Dimitri's definitely the one that's more comfortable at the weight. Beterbiev's talking about that move to cruiserweight. He's been at light heavyweight for a long, long time.
Heavyweight as an amateur.
Yeah. So for me, there's a guy that's going to be much tighter at the weight. I don't think it's going to have a massive difference, but I like the fact that Dmitry is so good at the weight because he's going to need that engine, and he's going to have to throw a lot of punches in there to keep him off. Can he hurt Beterbiev? For me, Bivol hasn't looked like the biggest puncher, even against, I know he stopped Zinad, dropped Arthur, but for me, it's about volume and it's about feet, and very difficult to do. So many fighters with great feet and great movement, everyone just says, you just got to walk them down. Just when you get up close, let them go. It's not as easy as that, especially against someone with the ability of Bivol. But as you said, Beterbiev is more than that. And he's got a lot more ability than people sometimes think as well.
But also, some people think it's tiring pushing someone back, making them move the ring. And it is, if you're doing it through urgency and under pressure. But if you're constantly having to turn and reset, that's tiring too, especially when you've got 39-year-old legs.
But Beterbiev certainly got the ability. You don't not have ability and beat Usyk in the amateurs. He's one of the few people that beat Usyk, so he can certainly box as well. So any talk about this being boxer versus puncher, are these talks premature? What do we think?
Yeah, I think so. I just think it's quite a basic, reductive sort of analysis to say that, because like Matt said, you look at what he achieved as an amateur and you look at the way he fights, and his feet are always underneath him. He's never in a rush. He never overreaches. He very rarely loses his balance. He turns at the waist. He's got immaculate boxing mechanics and heavy hands. And he lands on you. It might not be clean all the time. It might be half clean. It might be a shoulder, a bicep, a forearm, whatever it is. But you feel it. You feel it, and he'll make you feel it early. He won't come racing out, like Eddie said, throwing blizzards of punches, but he will land on you soon enough. And if you're Bivol, to be honest with you, that's not necessarily the worst thing. You probably want to feel it early and see what it's like, and maybe
Do you reckon he wants to feel it early from Beterbiev?
You said this to me before, Matt, where when you're going with someone who's a renowned big puncher, you kind of almost want that first exchange out of the way, just to think, what am I actually dealing with here? Is this power what everybody says it is? And okay, if it does take you a bit by surprise, you've got to just make sure you get a grip on yourself. But 2 or 3 rounds in, you can get used to it.
Usually when you're boxing a big puncher and that happens, in my experience, and it was always a case of, oh, that ain't that bad, I was expecting worse, because you're so mentally prepared for it. It's usually less than what you've built up in your mind, and it was actually the guys who you think can't punch that actually sting you with a shot because you were underestimating their power. So I think these two will probably get it about right with each other. I don't think there'll be no one underestimating the other guy. But I think the other thing worth noting about Beterbiev, what's so good about him as well, he's got that patience. That patience that big punchers have got. They know they only need one. Like Eddie said, he tucks up. He's bagging early rounds by doing very little, conserving, because he knows he's going to step on the gas as he breaks you down later on in the stretch.
I feel like when Callum Smith boxed him, he was doing very little, but he was still winning the rounds because you're afraid to let your hands go because you don't want him to counter. So at the same time, you're like, you have to be active, but you know that when you're active, because I think he won't be fearful of Bivol's power, is he happy to trade? You see that quite a lot with Beterbiev. People start throwing and he throws with you. So every time Callum was throwing, he was throwing with him as well. And obviously Callum would always come off worse. But the problem is he was doing very little against Callum, but he was still 4-5-0 up after 5. The difference here is Dmitry must bank these early rounds. If he can't have a lead at halfway, then you're in trouble in this fight because you know he's going to come on like a train. And it would just be interesting to see the pace that Beterbiev fights at early. Does he mind giving up the first 3 or 4 rounds? Or does he want to start fast, put that dent in him, slow his legs down and catch him on the straight?
The characters. You've sat at a couple of the press conferences. They're not saying an awful lot to each other, but it does feel to me like Beterbiev said a couple of things, just throwing a couple of things out there, but Bivol's not nibbling. At the launch press conference, he said something like, he knows, ask him. When they did a face-off at Fury and Garnu around the media, he said, Bivol always talks about he wants to fight, but he never fights. Bivol never bites. He's never said anything. What are you making of the kind of verbals or lack of verbals between them?
Yeah, at the first presser, Beterbiev said about 3 words, and it was like, I actually said, I'm sure you'll bring it up this week. I found it quite arrogant because you're flying him over and his team. You've got, I think it was you or Addy asked him the question, and he just went, good. And it's like, hang on a minute, you're getting paid an absolute fortune. You've got the entire world media here. You owe us a little bit more than that. He couldn't care less. And in a way, I respect it, but in a way, I think it's a little bit disrespectful. I'm not expecting him to come and start rolling around with Bivol here tonight, but you are a monster. You've got your role to play in this fight. You're receiving a huge amount of money. Let's play the game a little bit. But when you actually get into Beterbiev and break him down a little bit in the interviews, he's actually quite funny. And he's got this very cold, dry sense of humour that actually does come out, and he should show that a little bit more, because I actually think he's quite a funny guy. But he's not interested, and that's actually why both of these guys, maybe their profile isn't what it should or could be given their ability in the ring, but they're just searching for greatness, and that's actually all that matters to them. And it is a little bit refreshing in some sense, but in answer to your question, don't say that at the presser in front of Artur Beterbiev. Just
about the you called him arrogant.
Yeah.
Eddie, you called him arrogant.
I'd say absolutely never said it in my life.